That's why Jennifer keeps me around. She always will look good compared to me.
After the dazzling glory of Good Will Hunting, Ben Affleck seemed to have everything in his hands: wealth, fame, and enough power to make all of Hollywood bow in admiration. Yet the higher he stood at that radiant peak, the further he seemed from ever truly touching happiness. The relationships he went through with some of the most beautiful women, ranging from Gwyneth Paltrow to Jennifer Garner, ultimately left him with deep wounds and long stretches of silence tinged with sadness. It was not until 2021, when he reunited with Jennifer Lopez, that Ben believed fate had finally opened a door filled with light just for him. He believed she was his true love, the one who could stand beside him through every storm life might bring. Ben loved her with everything that remained in his soul and almost immediately decided to move toward marriage. But what he never anticipated was that Jennifer Lopez would betray that marriage, delivering a painful blow to the fragile trust he had been holding on to. After everything, Ben now finds himself struggling with profound bouts of depression. Loneliness has become a shadow that follows him everywhere at all times. In the end, who truly is the real love of Ben Affleck's life, and how much has he had to sacrifice for both fame and love? Let us step into a harsh emotional journey where the women in his life have helped shape the man Ben Affleck is today. First, let us open the very first chapter of Ben Affleck's heart. A first love that was both sweet and tragic. A person who planted within him fears, insecurities, and a deep longing to be loved that would linger for years afterward. In the early 1990s, when Ben Affleck was still a young man with eager eyes and a heart full of passion during a summer at a Vermont camp, Cheyenne Rothman entered his life like a gentle breeze. She was not someone who stood out, just a simple girl with a shy smile and clear, innocent eyes. But to Ben, she was an entirely new world, a sky of youth he had never touched before. For 7 years from their teenage days through the time they stepped into college, Ben and Cheyenne stayed together like two companions walking side by side through the years. To him, that was the most peaceful period of his life, when love remained pure and untouched, not yet stained by fame or pressure. But time never stands still. Cheyenne entered college while Ben began pursuing his acting career. Audition scripts and the dream of Hollywood gradually unfolded before his eyes. The distance in geography and lifestyles, and even in their differing concerns, silently created gaps that no words could ever fill. Summer afternoons spent apart, hurried phone calls, and increasingly infrequent letters slowly replaced the long embraces and deeply understanding gazes they once shared. Ben still clearly remembers the time Cheyenne accompanied him to the premiere of his first film. She stood there gentle and quiet, as if trying to hold on to that moment before everything changed. He looked at her feeling the familiar sense of peace, yet he also understood that the road ahead would no longer be the same. The stage lights, the cameras, the applause, everything was gradually pulling him away from the quiet world that Cheyenne represented. In the summer of 1997, they broke up, not with words of blame, but with the silence of two hearts that understood they could no longer walk together on paths that had diverged in different directions. Ben knew his career was opening up before him, and if he wanted to move forward, he had to trade away the most precious thing of his youth, his first love. Cheyenne chose peace, chose a life of her own, while he chose the light of opportunity, of roles, and of dreams he had long nurtured. The first love between Ben Affleck and Cheyenne Rothman became a quiet, yet profound wound in his heart, a beautiful but unfinished love. It left behind a lingering emptiness, a sense of loss that neither success nor fame could ever make up for. Whenever he recalls it, there seems to remain within him a hollow space where romance was never fully realized, where pain and regret silently became a part of who he is. The pressure from his career only made that loneliness more intense. As the stage lights and Hollywood's applause swept him along, Ben became more closed off, guarded, and vulnerable a man, forced to hide his emotions just to survive in the storm of fame. And it was within that storm that Ben Affleck met Gwyneth Paltrow. In the late 1990s, Ben stepped into a new world, one filled with the dazzling lights of Hollywood, but also riddled with traps. During that time, Gwyneth Paltrow appeared like a refreshing breeze amid a storm, intelligent, beautiful, and full of life. They met at a party surrounded by laughter, champagne glasses, and shimmering lights, and instantly felt an indescribable connection. Ben was drawn not only to Gwyneth's radiant appearance, but also to her sophistication and her uniquely charming sense of humor, something he had never found in anyone before. Their relationship quickly blossomed. Two young, talented, and ambitious individuals found each other in a glamorous world that was also full of temptation. They appeared together at events, worked on film projects, and shared moments that seemed to belong only to them. But Hollywood was also a place of pressure, scrutiny, and relentless intensity. The divide between work and personal life, the long nights on set, and the endless parties gradually eroded the peace in their love. Ben gradually realized that the sweet moments were always accompanied by anxiety and uncertainty about the future. Personal issues such as alcohol addiction, gambling, and a desire for freedom outside of love created cracks that were difficult to repair. Eventually, after multiple breakups and reconciliations, they officially separated around the year 2000. There were no accusations or arguments, just the acknowledgement that they were heading toward two different lives. Ben quietly watched Gwyneth walk away feeling a deep void that neither light's applause nor success could ever fill. After his relationship with Gwyneth, Ben threw himself into work as a way to escape reality. But Hollywood is not a place for peace, especially when the film Giggly alongside Jennifer Lopez was heavily criticized, dragging his reputation down with it. Amid ridicule and judgment, Ben felt himself being swept into a merciless wave, making his loneliness and self-doubt grow heavier than ever. Amid all those repeated heartbreaks, Ben continued to throw himself into love not out of naivety, but because he longed to find a place where his heart could finally rest, a glimmer of light strong enough to make him believe that the past did not have to dictate the future. It was not until Jennifer Garner stepped into his life that Ben, for the first time, truly felt something he had never experienced throughout his childhood, a sense of safety, a kind of peace that made his scarred heart want to let go of all its defenses and simply lean into it. In 2001, on the set of Pearl Harbor, when he caught sight of Jennifer in a white nurse's uniform, her brown hair gently falling over her shoulders, her smile directed at an extra glowing like a ray of light cutting through a hazy fog, Ben froze for a few seconds, as if all the surrounding noise had suddenly faded into the distance. At that time, he was the rising star, while she had only a few lines, but that small, pure smile etched itself deeply into his mind, like a vague promise of fate, something he would only come to understand much later. 2 years later, the wheel of fate turned again, bringing them back together in the training room of Daredevil Ben, in his tight red suit like armor trying to hold together the cracks within him. Jennifer holding her sai, moving with sharp precision, yet fluid grace, like a dangerous dance. Amid the smell of sweat and the rhythm of heavy breathing between punches that seemed to release everything pent up inside, they truly began to talk. Jennifer spoke of her exhausting, broken marriage, while Ben shared about a love that had collapsed under the glare of paparazzi. They laughed, but it was the laughter of two wounded people, two souls covered in bruises, recognizing each other in the chaos of Hollywood. And that night, when Ben drove Jennifer home for the first time in months, he did not turn to alcohol, a small sign yet powerful enough to show that his heart had found a temporary shelter in the storm. In the summer of 2004, their love grew quietly and sweetly. Ben took Jennifer to Fenway Park, where the soul of the Boston boy within him had always lived. She wore his oversized t-shirt, a baseball cap pulled low, nearly hiding her bright, perceptive eyes, and when the Red Sox won, Ben wrapped his arms around her, cheering like a mischievous child. Not an Oscar winner, not Bennifer, splashed across headlines, but simply Ben, a clumsy young man lost in love. Jennifer looked at him with a gentle gaze that seemed to embrace even his darkest corners, as if she understood all the pain he kept hidden and still chose to stay still, chose to love. On June 29, 2005, on a small Caribbean island glowing under the sunset, Ben knelt before Jennifer, his hands trembling so much he nearly dropped the ring box, his heart feeling as though it might burst out of his chest. The ring was not overly extravagant, but his words were filled with love. I can't promise to give you the whole world, but I promise to use my whole world to love and protect you. Jennifer burst into tears, nodding continuously before throwing her arms around him, the two of them collapsing onto the warm sand. They were married the next day before the sunrise had fully faded, and Jennifer would later say it was a day when she felt so overwhelmingly happy her heart could barely contain it. In December 2005, Violet was born tiny Rosie clutching Ben's finger as if holding onto his entire life. Standing beside the hospital bed, Ben choked up like a child who had just found a reason to keep living. I won't be like my father. I promise, he whispered, tears falling onto his daughter's cheek. And in that moment, he truly believed that promise could become reality. But alcohol never completely left him. It crept back during exhausting filming nights at seemingly harmless parties and moments when he watched his family laughing together while a cruel question echoed inside him. Do I deserve this? Jennifer saw everything. The hidden bottles in the garage, the tired, bloodshot eyes each morning, the forced smile when the children asked, "Are you tired, Dad?" She did not blame him, did not grow angry. She simply held his hand, drove him to rehab silently, shedding tears while still trying to smile. You have to get better. For the kids, for me, and for yourself. But sometimes, no matter how beautiful love is, it still cannot overcome the darkness rooted deep in childhood. On June 30th, 2015, just one day after their 10th wedding anniversary, they sat side by side on a familiar sofa, writing their separation announcement with trembling fingers. Jennifer cried in silence while Ben held her, his voice breaking almost beyond words. Thank you for staying with me for so long. And in that moment, there was no blame, no resentment, only a deep aching sorrow, because they both understood that love had never truly disappeared. It simply was not strong enough to save him from the shadows that had taken root when he was still a trembling little boy in a house heavy with the smell of alcohol. It seemed as though the tragedy had already reached its lowest point with his alcohol addiction, but no fate did not appear ready to stop, as if it wanted to continue crushing Ben's heart once more. As his marriage with Jennifer Garner wavered under ever-deepening cracks, the name Christine Uzunian suddenly emerged like a cold blade slicing through everything. The young nanny, who once carried a familiar, gentle presence, was abruptly swept into a vortex of suspicion that all of Hollywood watched with predator-sharp eyes. Just a few photos capturing her sitting on Ben's lap inside a private jet cabin were enough for the media to turn everything into a public trial, one where the public freely judged, condemned, and cornered all three individuals trapped in the storm. Christine, who had only been caring for innocent children, suddenly became the third person criticized by the entire world. Some believed she had once trusted in something very real between herself and Ben, that she had dreamed of a different future, a different life. Others believed she was merely taking advantage of the vulnerable moment of a man slowly collapsing under alcohol and emotional wounds. The truth, like a cold, misty veil, remained untouchable, leaving behind only rumors that shot like arrows into the already dying family of Ben and Garner. Christine was dismissed, carrying with her a stain of uncertain truth, one that would seemingly never be erased. 3 years later, when the divorce was officially finalized with a single signature, Ben sat alone in his car and broke down in uncontrollable sobs. Paparazzi lenses captured that moment as if recording his shattered soul. He called it the greatest failure of my life, and those words were not an excuse but a choked sigh from a man who had destroyed with his own hands the only place that had ever given him peace. He cried for his children who now had to grow up between two homes. He cried for the mornings he woke up with a heavy head and saw the confusion in his children's eyes. He cried because he realized he had become exactly the kind of father he had feared most in his own childhood, an absent one. From then on, depression became a darkness that suffocated his chest every night. In the large house that once echoed with the laughter of 3 children, now there remained only the lonely yellow glow of lights and old photographs quietly hanging on the walls. There were days when Ben looked into the mirror and no longer recognized himself. There were nights when he collapsed onto the floor, clutching his head, wondering whether things could have turned out differently if he had been just a little stronger, if he had not let alcohol drag him so deep. And yet in the midst of that collapse, within the silent sobs of a man whose heart was torn in every direction, there still flickered a fragile light, a longing to be loved, to be forgiven, to be held, and told that he was not a mistake. After every fall, he still forced himself to stand up again, even if trembling, even if exhausted. Ben threw himself into love with all the desperation of a man clinging to the last piece of rock before being swallowed by his own ocean. He did not just need someone by his side. He needed an embrace warm enough to pull him out of the depths he himself had created. During those chaotic days when his heart was still filled with wounds, not yet healed, fate once again brought Ana de Armas close to him. Meeting her on the set of Deep Water in late 2019, amid the tense and shadowy atmosphere of a psychological film, Ben saw in her more than just a co-star. In Ana, he found eyes as deep as if they held an entire ocean. A gentle smile, like early morning sunlight, and a warmth that made his heart hardened by too much pain. Tremble, as if it wanted to come back to life. He did not say it out loud, but from that very moment, he sensed that her presence would change something within him. When they began dating in March 2020, the outside world gradually shut down due to the pandemic, but his heart, for the first time in a long while, opened again. The chaos outside slowed life down, and in that rare stillness, Ben found Ana in a more complete way. Los Angeles became quiet, like a frozen city, while he lived days that felt strangely peaceful, walking the dog with her, talking under soft sunlight, laughing at simple things. To him, those were not ordinary moments. They were a soothing remedy, a gentle healing for a heart filled with too many cracks. When Ana met his children, Ben stood silently in a corner, observing as if holding his breath. He noticed the gentleness in her every gesture, the subtle warmth in her eyes toward the children, and in that moment his heart tightened, part hope, part fear. He worried for his children who had already been hurt by a broken marriage. He worried for Ana, a fragile light stepping into a life filled with darkness. But at the same time, he felt a rare joy, the feeling of having a family again, even if only for a fleeting moment. Trips away mornings, cooking together, evenings lying side by side, watching movies in the quiet rhythm of each other's breathing, all became beautiful memories so delicate he was almost afraid to touch them for fear they would shatter. Ana made him smile. From the simplest things made him believe that even a man who had stumbled so many times, filled with cracks like himself, could still be loved in the gentlest way. In Ben's heart, Ana was not just a lover. She was like a peaceful sky he had once thought he would never find again. But then toward the end of 2020, the truth began to reveal itself quietly, like tiny cracks slowly appearing on what once seemed to be a flawless surface. Differences in lifestyle habits and even expectations about the future gradually pulled them apart. Ben could clearly feel an uneasiness creeping in, like a painful intuition he could not quite name. Every conversation about the future felt like a tightening rope around his heart, making each beat heavier. He wanted to hold on to her, to cling to those beautiful moments, but he also understood that sometimes love is not strong enough to fill the gaps that life unintentionally creates. In January 2021, when they decided to part ways, Ben felt as though a piece of him had been torn away. There was no noise, no anger, no betrayal. The pain arrived quietly, lingering like a deep wound that did not bleed, yet left one breathless. He looked back on that one year, her smile, the familiar touch of her hand, the steps they walked side by side. All of it gradually faded into memory, yet remained sharp enough to cut into his heart whenever night fell. After the breakup, Ben often wandered through empty streets, his hands buried deep in his pockets, his head lowered as if searching for something he had lost, though he knew he would never find it again. He asked himself, what if I had tried a little harder? What if I had been stronger? What if I had not been so afraid of the future? But every question ultimately led him back to the same pain he had lost her. Not because of a mistake, but because they were like two beautiful parallel lines that would never intersect. Years later, after going through more upheavals after his heart had accumulated countless bruises, Ben would sometimes still remember Anna as one remembers a beautiful dream that fate had suddenly snatched away. Deep inside, he understood that a part of himself, gentle, warm, and longing to be loved, had once been awakened because of her. He still felt regret, still carried a sense of remorse for not being brave enough, or perhaps not lucky enough to marry that woman, the one who had once helped him see a better version of himself. Just when everything seemed completely shattered, worn down by years lost in addiction, depression, and bitter failures, fate unexpectedly brought Jennifer Lopez back into Ben's life like a powerful blow to the chest, so strong it left him breathless. She was the woman he had never truly had yet had never truly let go of. In his heart, a memory both sweet and painful, a silhouette he had thought buried under the dust of time. Ben had never admitted it to anyone, but deep down, Jennifer Lopez was the unfinished love that had haunted him for 2 decades. In late 2001, the first time Ben saw Jennifer walk into the giggly script reading room, her smile shone like an explosion of light in the heavy atmosphere. She wore a form-fitting red dress, her brown hair reflecting the light in a way that made Ben freeze for a few seconds. Back then, he was young, confident, and proud, but in front of Jennifer, he became awkward, like a boy experiencing his first crush. She was already married, and he was merely a polite colleague. Yet every time her eyes turned toward him, Ben felt as though he were being seen through, as if she could recognize even the fragile parts he tried to hide behind his cool exterior. In the summer of 2002, after Jennifer's divorce, they rushed into each other like two people starving for love after a long stretch in an emotional desert. Ben brought her to Boston into the small kitchen where his mother used to cook simple meals. He made pasta, she poured wine, they ate together in warm laughter, then held each other on the sofa as if the outside world did not exist. Jennifer said that being with him made her feel truly seen, while Ben felt as though he was living in a dream woven from laughter and sunset light. They clung to each other everywhere, holding hands in the streets, kissing under the Malibu sun, dressing alike like two people deeply in love. The media mockingly called them Benifer, but Ben did not care. He believed he was in love with the woman who would become his wife. Ben got down on one knee to propose with the famous pink diamond ring, his hands trembling so much he nearly dropped the box. Jennifer burst into tears, throwing her arms around him, and the world at that moment became so perfect it frightened them both. But the happier they were, the more they were scrutinized. Paparazzi surrounded them. The press mocked their every move, every word, every gesture. The pressure became so overwhelming that they could barely breathe. Just days before the wedding, Ben held Jennifer in a dark room, his voice breaking, "I don't want you to live in this nightmare." And then they called off the engagement. In January 2004, they broke up, not because they had stopped loving each other, but because they could not bear the weight of the world pressing down on their love. Jennifer called it the biggest heartbreak while Ben drove back to Boston playing Jenny from the block and sobbing uncontrollably like a man who had just lost the only light of his life. Years passed, each of them moving forward with their own lives, marrying, divorcing, and enduring pain in their own ways. But in 2021, when Ben was sitting in his large yet cold house, drowning in loneliness and depression after his relationship with Anna, fate knocked once again. They started texting each other. A simple message, yet it felt like it pulled his soul out of the darkness. "I still keep your letters." Ben confessed one tired afternoon in Los Angeles. Jennifer replied almost immediately, "I kept everything too." In May 2021, they met again. With just one look, 20 years of separation seemed to dissolve. They traveled to Montana together, sitting by a campfire, their hands intertwined, crying like two children who had found each other again after getting lost in the chaos of life. Ben said, his voice trembling, "This time, I won't let you go." Jennifer kissed him, her tears warm against his neck. "I've waited for you for so long." Their love bloomed for a second time, not as intense and reckless as before, but more mature, gentle, yet still deeply passionate. Ben learned Spanish to talk with Max and Emmy, though his mispronunciations made the whole family laugh. Jennifer held Violet and Seraphina's hands as they walked through the park like a second mother. They married quietly in Las Vegas under soft neon lights. Jennifer wore a simple white dress that was breathtakingly beautiful, and Ben looked at her as if he were witnessing a miracle life had given him for the second time. A month later, they held a grand wedding in Georgia. Lights shimmered, friends gathered, and Ben danced with Jennifer to I'm Real as if the young man from 20 years ago had returned. He wrapped his arms around her waist and whispered, "At last we have our happy ending." Jennifer smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "I love you forever." In that moment, Ben once believed that love returning would be a miraculous remedy, but reality felt more like a doorway into a labyrinth, both dazzling and suffocating. And the nightmare bearing the name Jennifer Lopez seemed to have only just begun. From the very first days of their reunion, Ben threw himself into the relationship as if he were trying to swim against a raging flood. He bought expensive gifts, arranged private dates, and tried to make everything perfect, not to show off, but to convince himself that he deserved this second chance. Yet the more he tried, the more he felt like an exhausted soldier fighting while trembling with the fear that failure would repeat itself. Every smile he gave Jennifer in public carried a trace of emptiness, as if the joy had barely touched him before slipping through his fingers. In the most private moments, like their honeymoon in Italy on a hotel balcony, where only the sound of waves crashing against the rocks remained. There were times when Ben silently stared into his now cold cup of coffee and wondered, was he truly living his own life or merely performing a role the world expected of him? Jennifer still smiled radiantly beside him, and he smiled back, but deep within his eyes stirred a quiet storm, a fatigue he did not dare to name. By the summer of 2023, that storm finally broke apart. When Jennifer spoke about her new album, her new documentary, and even the idea of publishing his old letters as a book, Ben felt as though he had been dragged back to 2002, when every secret and emotion of his had once been exposed under the cruel glare of flashing cameras. He sat in front of the documentary trailer, his face pale as if drained of life. "I don't want the whole world to read what I wrote to you when I was desperate," he said, his voice so soft it nearly dissolved into the air. Jennifer frowned slightly, hurt, yet unable to fully understand that deep fear, the fear of being exposed once again. Then, in February 2024, when the documentary premiered before the world, Ben sat quietly in the back row, his gaze as if trying to escape from himself. The way Jennifer spoke about their love, too intense, too public, too loud, made him realize he had stepped too far into a world that did not belong to him. He needed silence the way one needs air to breathe, while Jennifer lived on the light of the stage. Their heartbeats gradually fell out of sync even as they tried to hold on, with strained embraces, weary smiles, and evenings spent watching movies neither of them could later remember. Ben began to lose himself in endless nights. Alcohol came knocking on his door again. Meanwhile, Jennifer continued to shine under the lights, trying to save their crumbling love with promises, projects, and memories repeated over and over again. Ben listened, but each time he felt his heart tighten further, as if love was slowly turning into a gentle trap with no way out. By April 2024, when they decided to live separately, Ben was not angry, did not try to hold on, nor did he fall into despair. He was simply silent, a cold, heavy silence that made Jennifer turn away. On the day she filed for divorce, coinciding exactly with their wedding anniversary, Ben looked at the words irreconcilable differences and pressed his lips tightly together, as if loosening them even slightly would cause his heart to shatter. He did not resist, because he understood that if he tried to hold on, they would only hurt each other more. At their final meeting in the lawyer's office, they held each other for a long time. There was no more passion, no more promises, only two people who had once loved each other fiercely, now standing amid the ruins of a beautiful dream that had faded. Ben whispered, his voice breaking, "Thank you for coming back." Jennifer nodded gently, tears falling onto his shoulder like late rain. "I don't regret it," she said. "I'm just sad." The most painful truth was that Ben had had 20 years to understand who Jennifer truly was before returning to her. Yet he still deceived himself about his ability to become the partner she needed. It was not because Jennifer was wrong, but because he had lied to himself about his own limits. Even when Ben wished she would be less public, less visible, less emotionally exposed. In other words, less herself, Jennifer had tried. But that request was no different from asking the sun to stop shining. Her nature could not be changed. What Ben once believed to be adaptation turned out to be nothing more than an illusion. He thought he could shape Jennifer into a different version of herself, believing that love could bridge the fundamental differences between them. But he was wrong. After the divorce, they still kept in cautious contact, yet the lessons each of them took away were entirely different. Ben chose to value respect and a quiet life, seeing the separation as inevitable. Meanwhile, Jennifer, true to who she is, continued to live fully and move forward on her own path. After stepping out of his broken marriage with Jennifer Lopez like someone who had just escaped a violent storm, Ben still found himself trapped in the wreckage it left behind. The pain after the divorce lingered quietly like a heavy fog covering his mind. Even without saying a word, anyone could sense it. A part of his heart had fallen into the abyss of loss. He turned to work to keep himself occupied, but loneliness still crept into every pause between scenes. When the cameras stopped rolling and the lights went out, Ben often sat alone, his eyes red and tired. On his worst days, his hand reached once again for alcohol, a habit he had once believed he had buried long ago. One drink, then two, until the pain temporarily softened. But the next morning, when he woke up, the emptiness only felt deeper. He reminded himself, I can't go back down that road. His 3 children became the only reason keeping him from completely slipping away. Every time he video called them, he tried to smile, tried to keep his voice from trembling. Violet would ask, "Are you okay, Dad?" And he would gently reply, "I'm okay." A simple answer, yet behind it lay thousands of cracks he could not fully hide. His children became his anchor, reminding him that there was still something worth fighting for, worth staying sober for, worth standing up again. There were moments when alcohol whispered again, tempting him with sweet promises that it would numb the pain. And in moments of weakness, Ben would fall, letting himself drift into the haze. But each time he blamed himself even more. He understood clearly that it could destroy everything he had spent years trying to rebuild: his sobriety, his stability, and his image as a father, striving to be better every day. He would tremble in front of a half-finished glass and whisper softly, "No, I can't go back." Then he returned to therapy. Step by step, slow, cautious, and filled with anxiety. Each session felt like peeling away layers wrapped tightly around a deeply wounded heart. He learned to acknowledge his pain, to face loneliness instead of escaping into alcohol. That healing journey was not beautiful. It was messy, painful, but it was the only path that could pull him out of the depths. By 2025, Ben returned to acting with the action drama The Accountant 2, the sequel to his earlier success. Alongside acting, he continued running his production company, while emphasizing that his priority now was working while still making time for my kids. He admitted that in the past, directing had taken up too much of his time, leaving him with regret for missing important years of his children's lives. As for love, Ben remained open, but with clear caution. He was no longer rushing to find a grand romance, instead seeking gentle, comfortable relationships built on trust and mutual understanding. After so many breakups and storms, he gradually realized that true happiness lies in peace, respect, and the ability to share a life together without being controlled by public or media pressure. Mental health also became his top priority. Ben learned to slow down, to balance work and family, to take care of himself both physically and emotionally while minimizing pressure from the media as much as possible. He came to understand that happiness is not only found in fame or passionate love stories, but also in ordinary moments, warm meals, simple smiles shared with loved ones. Looking back on his journey, Ben Affleck has gone through relationships, marriages, and scandals, leaving behind a path filled with tragedy and sorrow, yet also rich with lessons. Despite the pain and mistakes, he never stopped searching, never stopped throwing himself into love as if seeking redemption. His story delivers a message that is both fragile and powerful. Love is precious, but it is also a challenge. And sometimes it is our failures that teach us how to rise and grow stronger. When we look at his life, we see both loneliness and an intense longing, and we cannot help but wonder, has he truly found peace, or is he still searching through unfinished loves? Feel free to share your thoughts below. Ben Affleck's story does not end with that of a Hollywood star. It reflects the journey of all of us to love, to stumble, to regret, and to hope. If you feel connected to and moved by this journey, consider subscribing to follow more deeply emotional real-life stories and to learn how to cherish and love more each day. Thank you for listening and for being here.